Hi, okay, I was a big fan of You season 1, so let's discuss You season 2. You season 2 came out yesterday for me when I'm filming this, slash maybe when I'm uploading it, which was December 26th. And I kind of low-key knew it was coming out near the end of December, but I didn't know when. So I feel like every time I was checking Netflix, I was kind of scrolling past the icon and being like, oh, does it have the little new episodes bar? And then I was watching a bunch of Netflix on the 26th because that's Boxing Day, so it was a bank holiday. So I was off and I was watching a lot of Netflix, and it hit probably 5 or 6 p.m. by the time that I scrolled past the bar and then saw that it said new episodes, and I was like, excuse me? No one warned me at Netflix? Excuse me? And so then I watched all of it. I watched all of it in one night. Because that's how I watch Netflix. I consume all of it. I binge it. It's more than a binge. Just too much Netflix into my brain. I take it straight into my brain. Too much of it. All of it. Anyway, but that means that now that I've watched all of it, I have opinions that I want to get out into the world. So let's discuss them. First of all, so I feel like the reason I was so hyped to see You season 2 is because I really enjoyed season 1, but I felt like season 1 was like a slow burn where at first you were the main character, Joe, you're okay, this dude's he's just charming, and then okay, he's a little creepy but with an underlying element of charming, and then it was okay, maybe he's a little obsessive, but it's because he really believes in love, but he's it's getting to the point that he's obsessive. And then it's okay, he's cold-blooded and just no. It's to the point where it's I feel most people by the end were okay, this is just not a redeemable character. I still feel there are probably some people who are especially, fangirly type, I would have done this too if I was younger, viewers who were oh, but it was all in the name of love and he just misunderstood and blah, blah. But I think most people by the end of You season 2 was okay, the psychopathy has been revealed. It was slowly and over time, but now we get it. So then it's I was very curious to see if You season 2, how they would address that, because the big, benefit of season 1 is you get to discover this over time, and it's intriguing and fun and mysterious, but when you already know that, where is season 2 gonna go? And I honestly came in predisposed to not like season 2, because I was kind of I just don't believe they can pull that off. I think season 1 should be standalone almost. At the end of season 1, I was when they released that they were gonna do season 2, I was but why though? It's just all the intrigue has been done in season 1, and then what are you gonna do in season 2? I mean, they did things in season 2. First thing that they did was they scooped the characters from New York and then tossed them across the country in LA, which I think was really interesting, because I am a person who is a big fan of shows that it's one of those things where it's the setting, the city is another character, you know what I mean? Sex and the City, how they were oh, it's the 4 of them, but the 5th big character is New York. I like that. I'm a sap for that kind of stuff. And I feel that was one of those, that was a show where it's oh, New York, and especially Brooklyn is a character in this show. It's so palpable, that New York is in the air, around them, which, so I thought it was really interesting that they chose another city that's very, it has its stereotypes, it has things that read very LA, and also it's almost diametrically opposed to New York. It's so different. So if I preferred the New York vibe in terms of I felt it fit with the character and the story more. But LA was interesting because it was okay, how does this guy who just feels so quintessentially New York just pass and kind of assimilate within LA? That was interesting. Yeah, I felt like right off the bat, this isn't a spoiler to say, like, the main character, Joe, he, like, tries to, like, not be exactly what we saw at the end of season 1, which is good because obviously, like, you want some sort of tension to keep you going through the show, and his tension was him trying to, you know, be a good person and, like, be worthy of, you know, change and stuff like that. Like, I'm trying to dance around it so it's, like, spoiler free. But essentially, I thought it was really interesting because he had this line, like, right at the beginning. Like, I think this was in the first or second episode where he said something like, he says a lot, like, I don't do this anymore, like, this isn't me anymore. And he had this line that was like, I don't project impossible fantasies onto... It's something like, I don't... I think what he said is, I no longer fantasize impossible versions of someone I barely know, which I think is super interesting because, like, to me, like, when I heard that, I picked up on it right away. I was like, okay, like, he recognizes what he does as a pattern, what he's done in season 1, and he's said, this is the thing that I no longer do. It is really interesting because, like, yeah, I don't know, I kind of, like, believed him a little bit when he said that. I was like, okay, like, because, like, I guess I felt like, oh, the awareness means that the character is going to avoid this, which he, like, doesn't fully avoid that. He actually doesn't avoid that. But, like, I don't know, just that, like, struggle between, like, he's aware of what he does, but then, like, it's so ingrained in him, like, this behavior that he can't, like, actually change, even though he's, like, completely aware and he says, like, I'm going to change. Like, it's like a constant, like, pull and push battle. And then, by the way, like, that kind of, like, me struggling to, like, say exactly how he phrases it is kind of because, like, he has all of these, like, very distinct turns of phrases that he uses through his narration, and, like, it's him narrating pretty much the entire series. And I felt like at first, like, his narration was so, like, self-aggrandizing, like, so just, like, pompous and, like, full of it that I was, like, almost like, dude, I can't stand this. Like, I know that that's, like, kind of his character is to, like, be that way, but it was, like, to an extent where I was like, the writers did such a good job with that they did a bad job, because now I no longer want to watch this. But I feel like that got better because, like, you know, he's this guy who, like, thinks he kind of knows a lot more than he, like, actually does. Like, he thinks he kind of knows everything. And so then, like, he'll, like, make these stabs at, like, oh, I bet that blah, blah, blah. Like, he'll say, like, something. And then the way that the show dealt with it is, like, a lot of times immediately something would happen that would be exactly wrong. Like, he would be wrong. Like, something would happen that's exactly opposite to what he had suggested. And so at least I felt like that kept it alive, because then, like, at first when it's like he sounds in this, like, he talks to himself in this, like, very, like, pompous way. If he was always right about stuff, then that would be, like, annoying as a viewer. But when he is someone who thinks he's larger than life but then gets things wrong, then as a viewer you're like, okay, like, I can get on board because he's kind of a fool. Like, he's, you know, like, I don't know, it just, otherwise I feel like it plays off as bad fan fiction where it's like, oh my god, he's a serial killer, but he's so smart and he just, like, knows everything and he's so calculating. And it's like, I don't know, that just feels old to me, and that feels like not like a story that 2020 needs. Like, that's more like that would have been, like, peak, like, I think, like, 2014, 2015, like, I don't know, back when, like, it was kind of like Sherlock was still really big, and, like, I don't know, I guess Dexter was over by then, but, like, those are the kinds of things that I'm like thinking of, where it's like, oh, like, it's the main character is this dude who, like, works in slightly alternative ways, but he's just such a genius. And, like, I don't know, I'm, like, not here for that kind of story anymore. Anyway, then another thing I want to say, Chris D'Elia, I think is, like, how you say his name? Like, in my soul, something's telling me that's how you pronounce it, but then, like, when my mouth says it, like, when my tongue moves, it's like, are you sure? Anyway, so I hope it's Chris D'Elia. Chris D'Elia's character pops up, like, in the beginning of the show, like, a lot. Like, a lot, like to the point, like, or initially, before it's like, they actually like meet and talk and like have a like rapport. Before like the characters are kind of more meshed up. It was like to the point where I was like, is this like, this just feels like lazy writing? Or like, is this like, oh, LA is such a small world, like this actually happens? Like I wasn't sure. Like he popped up like too much in the beginning before there was like any need for like his character to be seen again and again. Which is just like a small nitpick, but I was just like, I don't know where you're going with this. Like this, it was starting to like take me out of it a little bit by being like, this feels staged, which is like obviously like when you watch a show, you want to immerse yourself in the show. You don't want to be like, oh, like the writers like wrote in too much of him. Like, you know what I mean? Anyway, small nitpick. And then, what do I want to say? I just like, this is such a rambly review, but essentially like, I don't know, I just feel like overall, these are like kind of overall thoughts at this point. Like, the show deals a lot with different types of emotionally and physically abusive relationships and like the fallout from them. Like to an extent that I wasn't sure how on board with it I was, only because I feel like the first season reached a lot of people. Like I feel like a lot of people watched that show and enjoyed the show. And not to say like the writers didn't, you know, approach it from nuanced ways, but it's like, it felt like you're reaching such a big audience, and to, you know, include things that are kind of like triggering and to like show a lot of this stuff, like it felt like almost not needed to the show itself. Like there were definitely ways to minimize those kinds of plot points within the second season, I felt like, in a way that it might have just felt more like appropriate and palatable. Like not every show has to be appropriate and palatable. But to me, I was kind of like, I felt like it felt almost like it was trying for something that would be more shocking and more divisive, just so that it could get more clicks, like in that sense. Like more people are talking about like, oh my god, did you see this scene or whatever, or something like that, and drive more clicks, as opposed to like actually show something in meaningful or healing ways to like, because obviously like this is being consumed by an audience of people, like of just regular viewers, and I feel like net gain started with that kind of stuff versus like harm might have not been in the right balance, but this is just me purely speculating, just because I felt a little skeeved off, but like that's not, anyway, just a little grain of salt of how I felt like some of the relationships and themes played out in season 2, mainly being more heavy-handed, definitely more heavy-handed than season 1 in some senses. And I feel like just overall, like I was much less in on the show initially, but then like the second half of the season, personally, I felt like that really picked up. Like the first half of the season, I was like watching out of like obligation for like, okay, I liked the first season, let's see what happens. And then I realized like around like episode 7 or 8, I was like hooked. Like I was like, oh, this slaps. Like I am in, I am here. Which was really cool because I was like, that's what I was waiting for. Like that's what happened to me. Like I was gripped during the first season. And by about like, you know, episode 2 or 3 of the second season, I was like, okay, like I'll click on the next episode just because I like need to see where this is going. But like it wasn't that same sense of like, okay, what's happening? Like click, like next episode, like let's go. I like need to see. But it finally got there towards the end. So overall, rounding up all of those points together, how do I feel about season 2 of You? I feel like it was good. Like I watched season 3. Like it wasn't, I don't feel like it was as like big of a thing in my brain as season 1, because season 1 was again just like fresh and different, and I was like, oh, like that's not what I was expecting, and I'm gripped. And season 2 delivered, but like I expected some level of delivery. It probably exceeded my expectations just because I had low expectations because I didn't know how they could follow up from season 1. But then past that, it wasn't like, oh, this show is going places, capital PTM, places. It was just like, okay, this show came through. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I will watch season 3 when and if and when it's announced and it comes out. Dope. Good talk.